This is a diagnostic scan tool. In all modern vehicles, located somewhere on it, you're going to find a port that looks like this. This is your vehicle diagnostic port. You have no less than 6 different computing devices which are managing your environmental controls, your transmission, and of course, your engine. And any single one of them, if they detect some sort of performance issue or sensor fault, they'll turn on your check engine light. Check engine lights are typically the most dreaded thing in the world because it usually means that, well, the money light has turned on, and you're going to have to spend some amount of money to put that light out, because in some places it's required by law. The scan tool plugs into that diagnostic port and will tell you exactly what industry standard code has been stored in the vehicle's onboard memory, and it'll even give you other enhanced features depending on the scan tool that you buy, like real-time data, being able to reset stored codes, and just running other general diagnostics. But this is still a relatively new device. OBD2 is only a little over 20 years old at this point. Before that, you obviously had OBD1, and before that, you were really at the mercy of the vehicle manufacturer in terms of diagnostic interfaces. General Motors had theirs, Ford had theirs, Chrysler had theirs, and then you had the Asian markets and European markets who also had their own specialty diagnostic tools. And the further back you go from there, that's where things get difficult. Sure, vehicles in the 1960s didn't really have emissions controls. By the middle of the 1970s, it was kind of being gently pushed, like, guys, you gotta fix something about this. And something had to run your secondary air system for improved performance. And then we had things like electronic feedback carburetors, so it wasn't just a fixed meter dispensing of fuel into the carburetor. And then you had fuel injection, which absolutely needed some sort of a computer to operate. But with those early systems, when a fault developed with it, it was really difficult to diagnose. For example, I drive a 1982 AMC Eagle. Those of you who watch my videos regularly know I do videos on that thing quite a lot. In 1982, AMC made the weird and bold decision, and I mean bold, they had upgraded the computer inside of the vehicle. It's a electronic feedback system with a feedback carburetor and an oxygen sensor and solenoid control for your secondary air system if you so had that installed. But they then added electronic spark control. You see, the computer can retard spark timing while the vacuum system and mechanically the vehicle can advance timing. So this was a new thing to replace a vacuum system, which most people didn't like in the Pacer and early 70s vehicles. But now the computer was over budget. There wasn't enough processing power inside of this poor Intel MCS48 to do all of these features. It's amazing when you look at the MCS48 as a microcontroller. And, well, look. So on this page here is an example from Intel's own documentation. One half of it is talking about the uses as a fuel feedback system and a carburetor and an engine, and the other half of the page is dedicated to how it can be used to control a consumer microwave oven. Very flexible, but at the same time you will eventually reach those limits. So they had to remove the check engine light, and that's how they got around it. And again, that meant that if any problems developed with the computer, there was no warning or indication system. I cannot state just how much this blows my mind. The fact that in the early 1980s, it was approved by the Ministry of Transportation and the Department of Transportation that you could remove a check engine light, and that was legal. Like, it's still there, like the window's still there. If you take a light bulb, put it in the socket, attach power cables to it, just plug it into a battery, like, you can blink the light. There's just no wiring or provision in the computer to handle this. And this was, well, that was just normal. Let's look at Chrysler's lean burn system, which was a few years earlier than that. Like, you had almost no way to figure out how or what was going on unless you had a whole bunch of other tools to test it and diagnose it. One tool that they came out with was this large, expensive box. You could either plug it into the car and test all the sensors, or you would plug this box into the computer, and Chrysler's lean burn system was a computer mounted on the air cleaner, and yes, noise, vibration, and heat was kind of the killer of it, and you could test the thing on a simulated engine. With my AMC, they had developed a similar tool for doing the exact same thing, but it's a little more interactive than that Chrysler system. And of no surprise, I have one of those testers. This is the AMC ET-501 CEC Fuel Feedback System Tester. AMC called their computer in 1982 computerized engine control. In reality, it's actually a product made by Ford that was just kind of OEM to AMC. I don't know. I think Ford called it the C4 system. No, it was the Super D system, I believe they called it. Anyways, this is the tool that AMC was able to supply not only to service technicians, but also you and me, like the home mechanic, if they wanted to spend about $200 back in 1982, it's a lot of money, could get this kit. So, what do you get inside of this fancy gray box? Well, the first thing we see when we open it up is that you get a large instruction manual. This here covers how to set up the tool. If you run into any faults or any errors, it will tell you exactly what to do. There's a bunch of nice fold-out charts which then tell you exactly all the steps to do. A diagram of each portion of the emission control and engine management system. And even near the back here, it includes schematics as well on a nice little tab, so I can look at that and diagnose not only how everything is routed in the vehicle, but also pinouts of the diagnostic connectors. Diagnostic connectors at this point were not digital interface systems. There was no protocols. The closest thing you got to digital on these ports were, well, either you had battery voltage or you had no voltage. They were not that easy to blow up. And of course, there may even be bulletins in here. Like this one right here has a technical bulletin hiding at the very back. Boom, just like that, which just tells me about various enhancements and upgrades that were available. I have already scanned this book, so if you wish to find it, look down into the description below and I have a link that goes to the full document. It's very handy. It's worth reading, if not just for the diagrams. The rest of this here consists of the tool. I have seen two versions of this tool. This particular one has this extra box here. It just seems to have a bunch of varistors or thermistors inside of it. And otherwise, it's just a 25-pin port on both sides. But it's kind of screwed in and attached in such a way they really don't expect you to remove it. The actual tool itself has a large vacuum fluorescent display and two membrane buttons. They aren't labeled, they don't do anything like that. As you can see, they have AMC's branding all over them. However, if I look at the back of it here, it actually does specify that it's made by the Owatonna Tool Company. So that's a company that actually still makes scan tools today, quite good ones in fact. And then we have this cable which is attached to it. So this cable is for your battery voltage. And in this box right here seems to be another kludge or another update that's been given to this tester over the years. This is just a pair of capacitors that are used, I guess, for line filtering or something like that. And then you have your battery clamps on the other side. It's worth pointing out when it comes to updates here, we've already seen two that have been attached to this thing here. If you look actually inside of the door of this thing, first off, we have a warning here saying that you need to test your solenoids on 1982 vehicles for shorts, otherwise you'll damage the tool. And then someone's also clearly written here that you must connect the battery leads of the tester before any other cable. The kit also comes with a large bundle of cables, which covers every vehicle from 1980 all the way up to 1987, and technically the 1988 model year when Chrysler was just using the last of the Eagle parts. So I have this cable here, which has Molex connectors in either red or blue, and these ones here are used as defined and instructed by the tester itself. I have some of these fancy connectors right here, which are used to plug into not one, but two different years of computers that are available for the vehicle. And then I have this one right here, which is for like the earliest version of AMC's CEC system, which is a completely different connector entirely. And lastly, you have this thing right here, which is what AMC seemingly used from 1983 all the way up to 1988. It also has this large connector here, which the documentation seems to imply is actually more for Jeep. This isn't strictly for AMC's vehicles like the Eagle and Concorde. It will work on most models of Jeeps. However, it is not compatible with vehicles that use the Bendix or Renix computers from 1987 and onwards for fuel injection and whatever Chrysler was delivering. There's also 2 ROM cartridges that are hiding in here as well. Both of them are labeled. This one here specifies AMC 81, 82, 83, and 84 6-cylinder engines. This one here says AMC 83, 84, 85 4-cylinder. There's actually a bulletin that's listed inside of this book as well, which says this ROM here that only says it goes up to 1984 is fine with all following model years because there was basically no changes to the computer. These modules here are actually not all that special. This is just a regular UV erasable EPROM with a keyed plastic enclosure. Now, where does this go? If we go back onto the tester here, we'll flip it over. First thing we see here is it actually has a nice little map of everything that's supposed to be displayed by the tester at various points. But it also has this opening right here. This actually has 2 microcontrollers inside of it. There is a UV erasable version of the MCS48, which is probably doing input-output control. And then there's another chip over here I can't identify. I think it's National Semiconductors. It has a piggyback ROM socket on the back of it. And they've made it stick out the back of the tester. The ROM module is keyed in such a way that it can only fit onto that socket in one way. And that's how you provide code updates and additional diagnostic tools to the technician or end user. Yes, by the way, I have also dumped those 2 ROMs. Those are available on the archive.org as well, so if you have one of these testers and no ROMs, now you have ROMs for it. Ultimately here, the goal with the tester here is that instead of having to spend 30 to 45 minutes diagnosing the entirety of the vehicle emission system, its vacuum routing, its solenoids, and the various signals that are generated using a device such as the Sun MEA 1500, you know, the modular engine analyzer I did a video on. This here reduces the entire diagnostic process of testing the entire functionality of the vehicle down to just 2 minutes. For a technician and a garage, that's massive savings, because then you can just simply roll it in, do the test, and if it's passed, you don't need to spend all that time trying to track it down. You can then just say, we're done, get out of here. Or if you do know what it is and you find the fault, you've quickly isolated the fault, you can do the job, have them pay for it, the vehicle's out, the bay's ready for another vehicle. Just like with Chrysler's system as well, this entire diagnostic kit here works in 2 different directions. One, this can evaluate the health of all the sensors and the functionality of the computer feeding back into the carburetor as an independent device to see if anything's amiss, or it can test the computer directly and simulate an entire engine under a wide range of pre-programmed conditions. Because the ROMs inside of engine management systems at this time were hard-coded at the factory, not firmware upgradable, and for the most part remained completely static, the tester could send off a simulated engine state and it knows exactly what it's going to get back. So it can then pass or fail the tester on that for situations where the sensors and solenoids are fine, but the computer itself is at fault. How can I test that here for you? Well, do you remember a little while ago we had this computer right here? This is a CEC system. This is the one I did a video on where I depotted it in boiling water. If you read through the comments of that video, you'll see a lot of people who say that I completely ruined this thing by putting it into hot boiling water. The circuits are just like, they're waterlogged, they're ruined, they're like, it'll never work again. No, I know what I'm doing, and trust me. And as a result, we have the tester here, we have the cables, so you know what we're going to do? We are going to plug this in, and I'm going to prove to you that both this is how the tester works on testing the functionality of computers standalone, and that this one here still works. And yes, I did solder the connector back onto it. So let me grab the tester, and yes, I did correctly put the 6-cylinder ROM in there. If I put that off to the side there, we are going to throw our cables over here. I am then going to not grab a car battery, but instead I'm just going to grab a 12-volt battery here. And so the instructions first tell me to apply the battery power first. So, okay, positive and negative. And I think you can see that in your display there. You should be able to see that in your display. So it's right now asking me for what model year am I working with. So 83, 84, I give it a moment. There we go, 1982. Alt vehicle. So this is asking if the altitude jumper has been set in the vehicle. Well, we're not in the vehicle, and I'm currently below 5,000 feet anyways. There's no barometric pressure sensor in the computer, so no. Which country did this computer originate from? This one was actually given to me by someone in the United States, so I will select USA. What kind of transmission do we have? Well, for the purpose of this test, we're going to be using an automatic transmission. There we go. And now it's testing me. What do I want to do a test on? Do I want to do an engine diagnostics, or do I want to test the MCU? We want to do the MCU. So now it's telling me connect harness 4. So remember all those cables that we had? Well, if I dig through all of these, each one is labeled with what harness they are. So I will take this and plug that in. It is keyed. So we go like that. You then need to go with a tool and tighten the connector down onto the computer's mating connector. There we go. So I'll put that over there. Let's see if I can get this all in the same picture here. There we go. So it wants me to connect harness 4. So I'll then take the cable, plug it in. Are we okay? And I am indeed ready. So I hit yes, and now it says testing. And this will take a moment. What it's doing now is simulating the vehicle starting, accelerating, it's testing the feedback system, it's simulating various states of enriched or leaned conditions, various timing conditions. It's looking at the feedback of the solenoid's inputs and outputs, and then from all that there, it'll say whether or not it was functioning within the parameters programmed into the diagnostic ROM. And there we go. It says MCU OK. So I can now guarantee to you, as I unplug this first, I can now guarantee you that boiling this to get the epoxy out of the computer did not ruin the computer. Now, if you still aren't entirely satisfied that testing on the bench is just not a reliable test here it is being used to test the computer that is in my car, which is no longer as easy to remove, but it's still just one connector that plugs into the vehicle. Well, we'll set our year, 82. No high altitude, we're in Canada, no secondary air, automatic transmission, we'll test the MCU, connect harness number 4, and I have harness number 4 here, the computer's out, it's plugged in, so all I have to do with one hand is to plug it in. There we go. Am I good? Yes. And off she goes. MC OK. All right, well that makes me a little bit more comforted that it wasn't the computer that in this situation was causing me problems. But yes, I do trust this enough that even for my vehicle's own computer, I'll use it on that as well. Now, what we can do is that now that we have simulated on this here and I've tested that half, we need to now test this in a vehicle as well. And again, surprise, I have a vehicle this works in, so we might as well go outside and do it. In fact, what I've already done is I've pre-recorded the next segment here, or we go outside, we pull out the tool, put in the ROM, and then go through the diagnostics. A very interesting thing happened when I did that. I found a fault. I wasn't aware that there was any sort of issues with the vehicle at that time, and yet we go through the diagnostics, and on the last step it checks the vehicle retard and electronic spark control, and it finds a fault. And I correct it, and it passes the test. What in fact I was complaining about there, you'll see me talking about, this here is a universal ignition control module. You Ford folk know this as the DuraSpark 2. The more technical folk will know this as a yellow grommet DuraSpark 2 module. This extra connector right here is actually for external spark control input. I believe you can just jumper it to bypass it entirely, but in a vehicle like my 82 Eagle, this is required by the computer to retard spark timing inside of the ignition module, which is really the last point before the mechanical and vacuum advance in the vehicle that it can do anything like that. But no, I just found out that really it was just a dirty connector that wasn't fully seated. These things are famous for having their locking tabs falling off, so whatever, you zip tie it in, it's totally fine now. Anyways, I keep talking about this. Let's go to the testing point in the video as well. Next. All right, now we are out in the car park with the tester, and we are now about to test the tester on an actual AMC. The first thing we're going to have to do here is confirm which engine we have installed. That's easy enough. Yep, that looks like a 258, 6 cylinders, so we want to use the 6-cylinder ROM module. Let's see here, 1984, 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder. We'll take our tester, and there's our socket. Line up our keys, pop it in, follow the massive warning. So I will try to do this all with one hand. Can we do this all with one hand? I'm not sure. There we go. It's asking for a year. And I'm pretty sure this is a 1982. One of the easiest ways to know is to check the casting mark on the head. This says 84, but believe me, that's supposed to be an 82. We'll go back to this. We'll let it scroll. There we go. We want 1982. Do we have an altitude jumpered vehicle? No. Where are we? This is a Canadian model. Do we have secondary air? No pulse air? No air pump? No. What kind of transmission do we have in here? Yep, that looks like a Torque Flight 998, so that's an automatic. And what are we going to test here? Well, we've already done the MCU test, so we'll do the diagnostics of the vehicle. Connect harness 3 red. Okay, so I believe this is harness 3 here. What does it say? Harness 3 wants our red. So we'll come here to the diagnostic harness. Connect that in. Looks good. And it wants me now to connect this to the tool. Let's try this with one hand. This is going to be hilarious. Like that. Like that. Okay, are we good? Yes. And now it wants me to put the key on. So we need to go into the car and start the vehicle. Now also, we're going to need for this test a plug. You'll see in a bit. All right, we're in the car. Connect harness 3 red, we're good. Yes, key on. Floor it and hold. Release. Start vehicle. Now it's just waiting for the coolant switch to qualify and say the vehicle is warm enough. There it goes, it's testing. Floor it once. Increase to 2400. Disconnect vacuum to distributor. Now I have to get out of the car. Make sure your parking brake is on, by the way. Gently place that there. Grab you. Oh, this will be fun with one hand. Oh, it doesn't like it either. Okay, but there we go, as it wanted. Yes. Connect vacuum to distributor. Put that over there. Plug that back in. There we go. Yes. Do UIM system test. Interesting. Okay, so let's see here. Do UIM test. Perform electronic ignition retard test on 2. Alright. Alright, looks like I have some testing to do. Check that out. That one green wire there coming off the ignition module is what it was complaining about. So I just kind of looked around and I found it wasn't fully seated in there because it has broken tabs on either side. Sure, whatever. Well, I went back and did the test all over again, exactly like it tells me to do, and now it says pass test. So, as a result, this here now agrees that the performance of the computer, the ignition module, and every other component of the engine management system, or the CEC, is fully within specifications as laid out by AMC. This really does seem like a crude and very primitive diagnostic tool. Doesn't give you any sort of real-time data. There's obviously no scan codes that it can look for because, well, the vehicle has no ability to store any sort of fault codes on its own. Even the menu system on this thing here is pretty limited on what you can do with either a yes or a no button. But I find that it is still a very, very handy tool if you wish to keep these old 80s computers running, because there's so many pitfalls that you can run into that are very difficult to test. And, well, okay, I can't necessarily say that these things are cheap. If you go on eBay right now, as of 2023 when I made this video, you're looking at about $345 to $375 before shipping to get one of these. When I bought mine, carrying case, the tester, the ROMs, the documentation, the cables, I spent $350 Canadian to get it to my door. And I love this tool. I do use it annually. It's great. You'll use it in the spring, just do a whole vehicle tune-up. There you go, no problems. Run it again in the fall. That way you're all ready for the winter. If you find any issues, they're easy to rectify because this very quickly goes through them. So yeah, this is definitely a tool that I'll keep in my toolbox until I have to retire that poor vehicle. Anyways, that's it for this video. I really do hope you enjoyed looking at the AMC ET-501 CEC fuel feedback system tester. It's a really handy tool. And until next time, have a good one.